and Ioana Florea from Common Front for Housing Rights from Bucharest. Each will speak for about 15 minutes, then we will have about 10 minutes to discuss. And then we planned to have a 10 minutes break to clear our heads, but if the discussion is very intensive, then we might decide to skip that. And after that, we would have had a presentation by Eva Marcetic from Možemo, Zagreb. In the end, she couldn't come. So we will have two instead, one by Csaba Jelinek from Periféria Policy and Research Center in Budapest, and the other one by Luca Szőlősi from Solidarity Economy Center in Budapest. And then we will have a discussion about that too. So, Eniko, if you'd like to start.
Actually, with Eniko, we decided that I will go first. Sorry, not to say in advance. Just one thing, Agi and Eniko, you are co-hosts, and in case other people join in the meantime, and I don't see them coming in the waiting room, maybe you let them in. Great, thank you. And thank you very much, Agi, for bringing us together and for this idea to share new research in our region. And thanks everyone for coming. I want to, so this is why I will start and Eniko will go next, because I will make like a short introduction about our most recent research and about this book that came out in 2024, Uneven Real Estate Development in Romania at the intersection of deindustrialization and financialization. And this is a book project that has all the authors either as housing rights activists or supporters of housing activist groups. So everybody in the book had this motivation to work on the book project and to be part of the research. And the research was called Class Formation and Reurbanization through Real Estate Development at an Eastern Periphery of Global Capitalism. It took place from 2021 to 2023 in 8 cities in Romania, 8 different cities all around Romania's regions. And our main motivation to engage in this research was to help our activist work, in fact, so to uncover new things that just through activism we don't have enough time to uncover. So yes, we started researching because we wanted to find out why our city is transforming as they are, and who is pushing these transformations, who benefits from them, and also because there is a lot of change going on, and we wanted to see what are the directions of change, maybe also trying a bit to have some foresight to understand what will come in the near future or medium future. And we realized that usually in our activism, we target mostly public authorities. We engage with them, we look at legislation, we look at decisions of local public authorities, but we don't look so much, we don't have so much time in activism, in housing activism, to look at market actors, real estate market actors, and financial market actors, who are very important in transforming our cities. So, well, sometimes we confront real estate actors, but financial actors, we almost no time at all engage with them. So this is why we also wanted to do the research. And there are 2 directions that this research comes from and also takes further. One is coming from this previous research that was done by Eniko, coordinated by Eniko and done together with friends in Cluj-Napoca. Cluj-Napoca is the most expensive housing market in Romania, more expensive than Bucharest, the capital. And they had a research in 2019 about, it's called Building Site for Profit, Urban Development in Cluj. And it was a first concentrated effort to investigate real estate actors and the market in Cluj. And it discovered a very important aspect that privatization in the 90s and the 2000s, in the 1990s and 2000s, was super important in how our cities look today. Why are the markets more expensive in some cities than others? This linked to how privatizations went on and how deindustrialization and deindustrialized sites were transformed later into real estate developments. So we didn't have studies like this before in Romania. And this was one of the routes into this new book. And it is also one of the routes that we would like to continue. So to see how privatizations and privatization of housing, of factories, of land, of banks influenced how our cities look today. So this longer historical perspective, we realized it's important to understand why is housing not affordable and why is housing market looking as it is now and why public authorities react in a certain way in our cities. So this was one line of research, and the other line of research that led to our book and we want to continue is the one about financial actors. And I have to say that until 2017, we didn't really think it's so important to look at these actors, but it was actually our colleagues in Budapest and you, Agi, especially at the beginning, that you told us, no, it's important to look at these actors because they influence how housing looks like and how public authorities deal with housing. Because at that time we thought there is not much, there are not many mortgages in Romania. It's less than 500,000 or around 500,000. Not many people indebted with mortgages. Mortgages are not in arrears usually, so people with mortgages usually can keep up with the monthly installments. And securitization is also very limited in Romania. And at that time, there weren't many institutional investors. So we thought, no, there is not really financialization of housing in Romania. It's not so important. But in fact, the logics of financialization and the financial instruments and measurements are important in how our cities are transforming. And it's also something important to say that because these specific instruments or actors are not present in Romania, it's also hard to engage with colleagues in Western countries, in Western academia, in core academia, because they think if you don't have securitization and pension funds investing in housing, and if you don't have a lot of build to rent or huge rental markets, then it's not financialization of housing. But actually it is important to look at the launching grounds of financialization, what are the paths through which it goes into our cities, even if we have a high home ownership rate, even if the rental market is not so huge, is usually informal, property is fragmented, it's mostly small owners that dominate the market, also small and medium developers that dominate the construction market, but there are launching grounds for financialization. So we see new institutional investors, as I was saying before, especially on formal industrial sites going into our cities. So just to sum up, what is important from our research for activism is that now we know better how to fight with the public authorities when they actually propose solutions that are not for the benefit of, for the public benefit, but they are targeted at supporting market actors and financial actors. So we are better equipped now to identify solutions that are not real solutions and to argue with the public authorities that these are not the solutions that we want, and public social housing is the most important, and what we all the housing rights groups in Romania demand. And that, for example, affordable housing is a double blade issue. So it's important to look at how it's done. And I think Eniko will talk more about it. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eniko. Please.
Yes. Hello to everybody. We are very happy that we gathered here. So many people interested in Eastern European specifics, maybe. Regarding engaged housing research. So as you could see, our book is not in particular about housing, but yeah, in my talk, I would like to connect actually some ideas from this book, which are related to housing, to other papers that I managed to write and publish, which are more political papers and more linked to activism, if you wish. So based on these several products from last year, so I was thinking to speak about the role of housing in real estate markets and related activist actions, and then about the financial system beyond the housing regime, again, some connected activist initiatives, and thirdly, about the impact of EU policies on housing, which obviously requires organizing at transnational level. So first, about the role of housing in real estate market, as we could learn about this in our REDURB research, as a result of which this collective volume about uneven real estate development came out. So we, in the introduction and chapters 2 and 3 of the book, we actually examined how the state created the conditions for the emergence and advancement of real estate development through the privatization of industrial sector, housing, and banking system. In what regards the privatization of housing system, obviously we could re-emphasize 3 ways in which this happened. Was through selling almost all the state-owned housing stock to foreign tenants, and also retrocede formerly nationalized buildings and lands. So by these measures, the state actually disempowered itself and disrupted its ownership structure, and also disassembled its former system of production and distribution of housing. Another measure through which this privatization of housing sector happened was that the state withdrew from the production of public and social housing, with a very few insignificant exceptions. And thirdly, the state started to support the private production of private housing, including through real estate developers, so institutional economic actors, implementing favorable fiscal, urbanistic, monetary measures. So due to how the socialist housing regime looked like, and due to how its privatization happened, it resulted a very fragmented housing market, but it was a very important step for further financialization of the housing market. We have, the percentage of public housing in Romania is under 2%, and we have several small homeowners, but we also have more and more owners of housing who have more properties, and actually they contribute to the formation of the private rental market. Otherwise, the institutional developers, through their build to sell model, contributed to the high percentage of ownership in Romania. So it was, but it's recently, in the context of inflation and increase of the cost of mortgages, people are more and more enforced to look for the private rental sector. So developers are expected to switch to the build to rent model. Otherwise, these developers usually were Romanian, so Romanian capital played an important role in this, and they were listed or not on the stock exchange market. So, but all this story about the developments of the housing sector, so of the residential real estate, happened in the broader real estate sector, where the non-residential retail, office, logistic, industrial buildings, real estate sector actually nurtured and advanced this build to rent or buy to let model. And actually these were the real estate sectors which attracted the first big institutional investors who actually also transactioned this huge and very profitable office and retail buildings, for example. And as Ioana said, the switch towards using former industrial platforms as sites for new real estate development opened up a huge possibility for institutional investors also in housing, because they what they actually do is they actually make mixed use developments and with significant housing units within these developments. So as activists, when we deal with these issues, then we argue for the increase of public social housing stock, and we argue that the private rental sector is not an alternative to home ownership, but the public rental sector it is, and we demand from developers to transfer a percentage of the housing units they produce to the ownership of the municipality, so kind of socialization of private housing. Okay, what about the financial system beyond the housing regimes? As elsewhere in Eastern Europe, in Romania too, the World Bank and representatives of other international financial organizations pushed for the transformation of state financing system, and the creation of what they called a modern competitive financial system. And they pushed for the banking reform and later and nowadays for creating more opportunities for the involvement of institutional investors into financially supporting the economy and including real estate development. So we all know in Eastern Europe that according to how quickly the governments made this change of the financial system, actually made a hierarchy among the countries. Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic did better, were more successful and quick in these changes, while Romania was catching up later. So actually, when we analyze in the chapter 2 mostly, chapter 3, sorry, of our collective volume, when we analyze these changes of the financial system in Romania, we also have a look, but that's not in the books. That's in another paper that I wrote about these matters. Is to look to the socialist legacy and try to learn from the state socialist legacy about how the mass production of public housing was possible due to non-profit, centrally planned financial system, and how a totally other logic of using the surplus produced by workers in order to be redistributed to provide them public housing, for example, but also other public goods and services, could be an inspiration for activists to think about alternatives, socialist alternatives to current capitalism. And finally, a few words about the impact of EU policies on housing. In the book, we make a lot of references about how the accession of the country to the European Union actually was one of the vehicles through which the real estate market emerged and advanced and financialized later. Also in some of the other papers that I wrote together with Eva Betavazzi last year, we analyzed the economic policies which actually have an impact on housing without directly explicitly assuming this responsibility. We could see, and we should remind always how several economic policy instruments of the EU are actually facilitating not only the commodification of housing, but also its financialization, and is responsible for what it's called the financial accessibility housing crisis. So starting from the European single market and the Security and Growth Pact, which actually puts obstacles for member states to invest into public housing, but also newer instruments such as the European semester, which again making controlling the financial and public budget and public debts actually create expectations about reducing public investments, among others, into public housing. The European Banking Union and maybe most importantly, since 2015, the Capital Markets Union is actually the instrument through which, if you are a member state, you need to make legislation to provide investment opportunities for institutional investors. And even more recently, the Next Generation EU and one of its instruments, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, is another way to condition the loans and the grants that the member states receive from the Commission for making reforms and for implementing what they call the green and digital transition. And And all these reforms are actually, again, about, creating more possibilities for investments. For example, in Romania recently, that's not in the book or in this paper, it's a more recent development. The government returned to the idea to push more for the private pension funds, which, as we know, are actually instruments for further financialization because they can be used by institutional investors in different economic sectors. So yeah, all these matters make us, for example, in the European Action Coalition for Housing, for the Right to Housing and to the City, to take political positions against these EU developments and also including this recent European Affordable Housing plan, which, as we can see from the preparatory documents, actually recreates this old model of promoting and supporting investment funds, institutional investors, by using public money in their support, and also creating investment opportunities for them, right, in the housing sector. Yes.
Great, thank you so much. So I would suggest we have a bigger round of questions and comments, and then get back to the speakers. But I seem to have problems with the controls of this Zoom. So Ioana, if you don't mind, could you take over the task of just picking the people who put up their hands? And please put up your hands using the Zoom control for putting up hands.
You can use the raise hand option, or if you cannot, you can put a small star in the chat here, and we see you. Otherwise, we warmly recommend this study from Daniela Gabor and Sebastian Kohl from 2022 about EU housing policies and how they are advancing this kind of financialized investment into them. It's a very good report. It has some parts that are complicated at the end, going very deep into securitization policies and methods from the EU, but the more advanced, if you have a bit more advanced economy knowledge, it's even that part is good to read, a good read.
Yeah, that was one of the reports which were made in the past 5 years under the auspices of some members of the European Parliament. So there are quite many, I mean, not so many, but quite enough analyses and recommendations which were put on the table of the at least European Parliament members. So the European Commission also could take care of those. But yeah, seemingly nothing actually happens in these terms. So actually also this shows the powerlessness of the European Parliament. They also had several resolutions regarding social housing, affordable housing, eradication of homelessness, but none of those resolutions actually became part of EU regulations. So we have now only this European affordable housing plan, which again does not speak at all about public housing as a solution, because obviously this is not a sector where institutional investors could make profit. So all those recommendations about how to definancialize the housing sector actually were not heard by commissioners, and this new plan actually creates more opportunities for the financialization of housing, as far as I understand. Yeah, and then if there are no questions, so I may continue also with some ideas. We did not look in the book. Obviously, we were talking in the book a lot about the role of the state in creating the conditions for the emergence and financialization of real estate development. But yeah, we could continue, and maybe we will sometimes, with analyzing how the state institutions are themselves financialized when they are taking loans from international markets, or when they issue bonds alongside with the European Commission, right? Because this is actually what happened with all this Next Generation EU and with the resilience facility, was that the European Commission tried to attract investors, so issued green bonds, mostly green bonds, which actually are a form of debt, right? And they pay interest rate to the investors who buy these bonds. And the member states actually got their loans through this channel. So actually, the European Commission is already financialized, if you wish, or its governance model, or way in which it creates or attracts money for economic development, and that goes to the member states. So yeah, I guess this would be another matter that would be good to describe what's actually happening, and how states are indebted in terrible ways, and how this results in newer and newer waves of austerity measures.
And speaking of which, maybe Csaba would also talk about it, but the role of the state for the future seems to be to de-risk financial investments into public services. This is also a topic that Daniela Gabor looks into for several years already, around 5-6 years, 7 years. She looked at countries in Africa, but governments in Africa and what they have to do to attract investment, but probably this is also valid for semi-peripheral territories like Eastern Europe, that a state has to ensure either continuous rents for investors that will invest in public services, and to take over when there is a crisis or a problem. So this, yeah. But Sonia, you want to go ahead with the question?
Yes, thank you. So 2 questions really. So having all of this in mind, are there any examples, not only from Romania, but in general from European Action Coalition, of, let's say, creative local bureaucracies on the progressive side, that some local administration did something to invest in developing public housing, or just to do some progressive solutions that are actually not terrible and not within this, like basically what is to be done, or are there any good examples of good policies at the local level? And then I wanted something else, but it escaped me now. I'll remember. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Comes to my mind, for example, comes a case in Romania some years ago, a few years ago, a small city, not super small, but kind of small, developed social housing. So like a few hundreds, almost covering the entire list of requests in that region. So local examples, we can find some for sure. It's more this um, high, like macro level that, or even meso level, like Bucharest and Cluj, really big cities, even Timișoara, big cities above 200,000 people, they don't really do it. In smaller cities where there is not so much market pressure, there are authorities who still do things, like local authorities. And they can access that. There are state funds that they can access to do local social housing projects. But it takes some time. It is a bit of a complicated bureaucracy. So either the small authorities either lack the capacity, and the big ones lack the political will.
And I remembered, so because nobody else is speaking, I wanted to ask another question. And this is something that I think I discussed at some point with George Zamfir, who I think is here, you know, one time when we met somewhere in Europe, about the mobilization for social housing that is owned by the state or the city, that is in public ownership, and then it's rented out on very favorable conditions to people who need it, versus people just wanting to get their own apartments. So, and this is related to some other topics right now in the Balkans, but basically, you know, not too complicated. It would be easy for either activists or the government to mobilize support from, like, okay, we're going to build housing and then we're just going to give it to you, and it's not going to be expensive to buy. And that is, people say, like, yeah, great, that's what we want. But, you know, on the other side, here is a very good housing, but it's not going to be yours. And people are not very enthusiastic about that. And we understand historical reasons behind that. But, you know, how is that? Do you see that as a problem? And, you know, like, what to do about it?
I'm thinking now to, and maybe Eniko can go ahead after that, but I'm thinking to answer in in 3 ways maybe. Like we had interviews with many people, and for example, with people who used to work at state companies before the 90s when they were privatized, and they said we never thought about buying a property, a house, because it was so cheap to rent. It was so advantageous to rent from the state. So we didn't think about buying. Some people still bought or build on their own. But those who were in rent, they thought, yeah, it's so advantageous to just stay in rent, so why buy? And houses were also not very expensive. That's why, because there was not so much demand for them and not so much market speculation on them. That's one way to answer. The other is there are still many requests for public social housing in Romania, at least. So Bucharest, for example, has 20,000 requests, so 20,000 households, which can mean maybe 100,000 people, maybe, who are on the list who requested public social housing. So there is still request, and people still want that. And the third way to answer is, it is, for example, the right-wing conservative party, who promised cheap personal property and cheap credits. And this was one of the reasons why they were supported, because they promised this in a context of very huge uncertainty and risk. Also, the investors know it, there's risk. So in a context like that, people also turn to private property as a way to insure themselves. But as we were discussing some years ago, there are many very precarious owners in rural areas, in small cities, who can lose their home because of utility arrears, because of not being able to pay utilities. So we reach out to those as activists. We reach out to those as well. Thank you for the question, Sonia.
Yeah, maybe I would add that this is a political construction, so the option for home ownership regime or private rental regime or public rental regime. So, for example, during socialism in Romania, also in the big cities, like 40-50% of the total housing stock was in personal, only this percentage was in public property, right? So personal property to housing was a constitutional right. And that was the reason why the state actually allowed this mixed housing regime, because there was a huge need for new housing construction, and the state used several mechanisms and ways to respond to the housing need created by industrialization and urbanization. So actually also always have to see these larger political economy trends which create solutions for particular types of tenures. But yeah, I would say that as activists in a short term, I would opt for a diversity of solutions, including cooperative housing, including maybe affordable housing at a low price, accessible for lower income working classes or middle income working classes. But in the long run, I would think about measures that are more capable to extract more housing units from the market. So actually, I guess for political activists for housing justice, this would be the one of the final ideas to say, like, if the market and financialization mechanisms are responsible for creating the housing crisis, then the solution is to extract as much housing units from the market as possible.